Hi, everyone. I'm Seth Shostak, senior astronomer here at the glamorous SETI Institute in the Silicon Valley. And this is going to be a very short little presentation to accompany your afternoon snack about the Fermi Paradox. And, oh, by the way, I'd like to also welcome any viewers on Twitch, just in case. Now, the Fermi Paradox, you may have heard about it. Maybe you find yourself waking up in the middle of the night talking about the Fermi Paradox. Maybe you accost people on the subways on your way home about the Fermi Paradox. For those of you who don't know about the Fermi Paradox, let me just give it to you very briefly. It apparently dates to a comment that was made by Italian-American physicist Enrico Fermi in 1950. He was having lunch. I think it was at the Los Alamos facilities, the Los Alamos labs in New Mexico, and he had a couple of fellow physicists, two other physicists there with him, and he suddenly said between two bites of a sandwich, "Where is everyone?" What he was saying by that is he figures that there should be aliens everywhere. Now, what he had done was this very simple calculation. Even you can do this calculation in your heads, for those of you who still have heads. And it goes as follows. Consider the Milky Way galaxy. I mean, just consider it. It's roughly 100,000 light years across. Now, if you had a rocket that could go, say, 10% the speed of light, then you could go from any place to any place else in the Milky Way in a million years or less. And if you could only go at 1% the speed of light, that's a little bit more tractable, then, okay, it would take you 10 million years. Now, if you do this calculation a little bit more in a more refined way, random walks and all these mathematical tricks that physicists like to intimidate the unworthy with, then you'll realize that somebody could, in fact, visit every star system if they had their kids continue this journey outward within 30 or 40 million years. In other words, within 30 or 40 million years, any society that had an interest in colonizing the Milky Way could do it, right? They could send out some colonists to a couple of nearby star systems, have them camp out on appropriate planets there, build up their culture, introduce, cultural offerings like opera and reality television and so forth. And after maybe a few thousand years, those societies would send out a couple of more colonists, and they would colonize some other places. All right. So within 30 or 40 million years, an enterprising society could colonize the entire galaxy. Now, 30 or 40 million years is very short compared to the age of the galaxy, which, after all, is on the order of 12 billion years. Okay, so there's been plenty of time for this colonization effort. And not everybody has to be interested in doing it. Only one society, if they're keen to build an empire, like your fellow, like your colleagues at work, trying to build an empire, if that's what's of interest to even one of them, then there's been plenty of time for them to do that. So what Fermi was saying, and with far less effort than I've expended on making this explanation, that the galaxy should already be colonized. It should have been colonized billions of years ago. And consequently, today we should look around and see aliens everywhere, with their signs SPQR or whatever. They've colonized the entire Milky Way. And so his question was, well, where is everybody then? Because he didn't see any aliens. I mean, yeah, there were residents of New Mexico, but they didn't count. Okay? So that's what's become known as the Fermi Paradox. On the one hand, we like to think that there are aliens everywhere, and on the other hand, we don't see them everywhere. So something's wrong somewhere. Okay, well, a lot of column inches, a lot of palaver has been given over to trying to reconcile the idea that there could be aliens everywhere with the fact that we see aliens nowhere. So let me just give you some idea, give you a flavor of the kind of explanations that are offered here, suggest some of these things. On the one hand, and this was an argument of Frank Drake, who's responsible for a lot of the work that we do here at the SETI Institute, Frank Drake years ago pointed out that the cost of sending a rocket from one star system to another, well, it's a lot because the energy involved is a lot. It really doesn't matter whether you have dilithium crystals or, dimolybdenum crystals or any other kind of crystal. it's very expensive. The energy cost is very high. In fact, the energy required to do that, is comparable to the amount of energy that the United States burns up over the course of the next couple of hundred years. That's a lot of coal, or if coal is no longer your energy source of choice, that's a lot of windmills, and in space, nobody has windmills. Okay, so, that's point one. He says, look, it's just too costly, and if you worked out the cost in dollars or, Klingon cruceros or anything else, you find out that it's going to be a lot cheaper to give all the residents of your planet a super-duper lifestyle of the rich and famous, or at least the rich, for much less expense than sending them off on a colonization mission to some other star system. So he says nobody's going to do it. It's not cost effective. Well, maybe, but they don't all have to do it again. If only one society has ever decided it's keen to do this, it'll be okay, right? Not all societies 2,000 years ago decided to colonize the Mediterranean, but the Romans did, and they were pretty quick about it as well. So there's still that problem. Now, another possibility is that, you colonize another star system, but those colonists, they get pretty, cantankerous fairly quickly. I mean, look at the history on Earth, right? The British colonized, almost the entire planet at one point, right? But the colonies have all, within a few hundred years, they've all either sought their own independence, like the United States did, or they have sort of an autonomous government, maybe like the Australians. I mean, it could be that the colonists kind of lose interest in the project. Okay, I'm here because you wanted to colonize this star system, but I'm really not so keen to go colonize another star system. I'm just going to stay at home and play free cell. All right, so that's another possible explanation. A third possibility is that, maybe the galaxy is urbanized, right? Maybe there are areas that are very heavily colonized, but there are other areas which are not so interesting. Nobody wants to be stuck out there. It was sort of like the Roman legionnaires in Bath in the west of England, right? If you got stationed out there, that was just not a choice assignment, right? There was nothing happening out there. Not then, probably not now. So, you didn't want to do that. As a result, the Roman Empire was kind of urbanized. There were certain areas where there were a lot of Romans. There were other places where there was essentially nobody. So that could be, maybe the galaxy has some urban centers, but we're not in one of them, right? So we don't see any other aliens because they're not going to this part of the galaxy. That's a possibility. There are many others. There are books. There's a book by a fellow by the name of Webb. That's his last name. His first name is Webb. His middle initials W. Webb has written a book on explanations for the Fermi Paradox. If you're seriously interested in this subject, despite the conversation we're having here, it's not really a conversation. It's a monologue. But if you're still interested, you might want to look that book up. Okay, so what can you conclude from all of this? What's the bottom line? And the bottom line is there's no bottom line, right? Because you can say, all right, I think the fact that we don't see aliens everywhere we look in the galaxy, and because there's been time enough for them to be everywhere, the aliens simply don't exist, and humans are the smartest things in the galaxy. This is slightly self-serving and probably untrue. But until then, all you can say is, look, we couldn't even see the aliens if they are out there, right? How are you going to see them? We're trying to pick up their radio signals, but we've only looked at a very small number of star systems, so the fact that we haven't found any with our SETI experiments isn't significant yet. So that can't be used as an argument here. All you can say is, we don't see them, but I didn't see any tigers on the way to work either. Doesn't mean that there aren't tigers somewhere. It just means that none of them were on the surface streets that I used to get to work today. Okay, I think you now know more than you ever wanted to know about the Fermi Paradox, and I hope that this will provide some satisfying conversation with your significant other this evening at dinner. Thanks for paying attention. I'm Seth Shostak. This is the SETI Institute.